Hello, Fiendlings, how the hell are ya? It has been a crazy couple of weeks, although I can't say why. I'm still hunting for a cover artist, but should hopefully find one before the end of the month. Then we can hopefully get the final two Black novels into production. Speaking of production, the audiobook for my new novel, Kill Shelter, is available from Amazon and Audible. Links are in the show notes. If you've already read Kill Shelter, please make sure to leave a review. Every one helps sell more copies. Sacculina still has 4 more episodes after today, so you can expect Kill Shelter to start its run sometime in December. If you're enjoying Sacculina, please leave a review at Amazon and Audible. I very much appreciate it. I'm making progress on the Medusa Zone Part 2, but I don't have any dates as to when it will be finished, much less published. Since it's going to be a longer book than the first installment, things are a little more complicated on the storytelling front. Which is a good thing. It means more opportunities for beasties to show up. And I have lots of ideas about that. Well, enough of all that nonsense. Let's find out what's going on at Green Island. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 15 of Sacculina. Chapter 15. Infecting Mina hadn't been difficult for Ellen. She faked a cramp, called for help, and Mina was in the water. A few minutes later, when she was close enough, Ellen loosed one of her eggs, and the parasite crawled inside Mina. She had reacted with a cry of disgust, slapping at her shorts beneath the waves. For a moment, Ellen wondered if the woman would drown, but Mina finally stopped panicking and was able to swim back to shore. Once there, she and Mina drove back to the bungalows, but Ellen had no intention of going inside. After Mina left, she walked east. When she heard the sounds of a cart approaching, she ducked into the jungle behind some fronds and waited. A moment later, Nicholas drove Bill, Philip, Autumn, and Janet toward the main house. That gave Ellen a moment's pause. If Autumn had infected them all, were they all heading to the doctor? Could he do something to hurt the eggs? Could he do something to hurt her? Ellen didn't know. All the doctor had, if you could call him a doctor, was drugs, antibiotics, painkillers, and the like. The man's examination room consisted of a cubicle with an examination table, the usual PCP accoutrements, including tongue depressors of all things, and not much else. Even if he knew about the parasites or figured it out, the only thing he could do was prescribe antibiotics. Ellen frowned. Antibiotics could be a problem, although she didn't know for sure. Bill had been taking them for days, but if Autumn had infected him, chances were there was nothing to worry about. Antibiotics or not, the parasite would take over, and he would become one of them. He'd be her lover again. Her protector, her beloved. Right now she could barely stand the sight of him, much less the awful smell coming from his body. His handsome face had become a horror show of lines and crags, just like everyone else who wasn't infected. That would change, though. By tomorrow, the entire island might be theirs. Then what? The ocean was a big place, and the chances of encountering more people without a boat were slim. But they had a ship here. She grinned, thinking of the yacht. If she and the others could infect the crew, they could leave for a populated area as early as tomorrow evening. Where would that be? The captain would know, and he would take them there. All of them. A beach with hundreds or thousands of people in the water would be ideal. She and the other females could empty their egg sacs and let the parasites do their job. Within a few days, they might be able to infect tens of thousands. Her loins itched with want at the idea. She could practically hear the eggs' contents moving and wriggling inside their temporary prisons, desperate to find a host. Soon, she murmured to them. With the cart out of sight and no one else coming, she took up the path again and continued heading east. Dr. Ryu sat behind his small desk with his feet on its edge, hands cradling the back of his neck with his fingers interlaced. The nip of rum he'd had a few minutes ago had settled his nerves somewhat, but it couldn't do the job of a huge tumbler of the stuff. What he wanted more than anything was to lay on the exam table, close his eyes, and drift off. But he couldn't do that with guests around, especially since this batch appeared so accident-prone. He dealt with a few scrapes here and there, and once, a simple broken bone, but rarely anything more consequential than that. Antibiotics and analgesics usually did the trick. Now, though, he was beginning to wonder. Angelo had been bitten on the testicle by something. Ryu's brief, somewhat embarrassing examination of the area revealed nothing more than a tiny puncture wound. The skin had looked angry and raw, and he no doubt Angelo would be uncomfortable for a day or two. He'd given the man a course of meds and ushered him out, making him promise not to go back in the water any time soon. Angelo hadn't bristled at that. The valet had looked terrified at the thought. Miss Janet, on the other hand, was a little more complicated. With her husband out of the room, she explained in halting, tear-filled words about feeling something within her vagina, something that wriggled before biting her inside. Or at least, that's what she thought had happened. Ryu had almost no gynecological training and lacked the instruments to inspect her properly. Not that he wanted to, especially not with her husband just outside. That was a complication he simply didn't need. He'd been accused of sexual interference before by a drunken patient, which resulted in him getting kicked out of paradise and sent to this shithole. So what had he said to Miss Janet? He told her to explore herself for any foreign objects or bumps. The woman had blanched at that, although from embarrassment or horror, he wasn't sure. He had closed the curtains around the examination table and waited for her to finish. Ryu wasn't sure, but he thought he'd heard her weeping. When she pulled back the curtains, her face had gone pale, but she managed a weak smile. "Didn't find anything," she said. Ryu wanted to ask her if she was sure, but thought better. She looked terrified, either because she found something and didn't want to tell him, or because she hadn't and was scared just the same. He thought the former more likely. Testicles, vaginas, genitals. Odd places for bites that resembled puncture wounds. Even stranger, he'd never even heard of such a thing. That was worrisome. Although Mr. Green would no doubt disapprove, Ryu was on the verge of telling the valets that no one was allowed in the water deeper than their knees. If there were some kind of aggressive fish in the lagoons and near the shore, it was best they stayed clear of the ocean. He had a feeling there would be complaints from the guests, but what else was he supposed to do? He wasn't a marine biologist, let alone an infectious disease expert. Hell, he didn't have a clue what to look for. No, it was better if no one went in the water. He glanced at the small tablet on his desk, sat up, and grabbed it. The island had a strict no-internet rule for guests, but not for the staff. After bringing the tablet to life, he entered search terms for fish, puncture wound, small, and their location relative to the nearest large landmass. Nothing apart from a few worms, stingrays, and the like. Everything he saw was too large to inflict such tiny wounds or preferred deeper water. Grumbling to himself, he stared up at the ceiling. What had Nicholas said? Something about a deep green colored crab? And Mina had also mentioned they'd seen one on the North Beach. Ryu added green crab to the list of search terms and hit go. The tablet thought for a moment before the page filled with results. Scientific articles appeared, as well as a Wikipedia entry for Sacculina. Eyebrows raised, he tapped on the article and began to read. A moment later, there was a knock on the door. Sighing in frustration, he put down the tablet and opened the door. Kingston, the 6'2" maintenance man, stood just outside the threshold. His normally light grin had disappeared, leaving an expressionless line in its wake. "Allo?" A terrible but familiar odor wafted from the man. Where had he smelled that before? Ignoring his singed nose hairs, Ryu forced a smile. "Do you need something?" Nodding, Kingston pointed at the medicine locker. "I was bit," he said robotically. "They said you give antibiotics for it." "Yes," Ryu said. "Of course. Come in and take off your clothes." The much taller man blinked at him owlishly. "Why?" Ryu furrowed his brow and cocked his head. "So I can examine you." Kingston stepped into the room, Ryu backing up to make space. "I don't need to be examined." "I would think you do," Ryu said, pulling a magnifying glass from his desk blotter. "Don't you want me to look at the bite? Where did it bite you?" Kingston pointed downward at his crotch. The foul odor seemed to be coming from there. Ryu nodded to himself. Genitals, again. "Let me take a look." Just as robotic as his speech, Kingston turned in a pantomime of human movement and pulled the door closed. His red-lined sclera gave his eyes a malevolent tinge. "Okay." Kingston walked slowly to the bed while Ryu grabbed a pen light. He turned and watched clinically as Kingston unbuttoned his shirt. Before reaching the last button, the folds of the shirt opened briefly, revealing grayish flesh with mottled red lines running through it. Ryu reflexively stepped back. Ignoring him, Kingston removed his shirt and folded it neatly on the bed. Eyes fixed on Ryu, he undid his belt and pulled down the zipper. The shorts dropped to his feet. Ryu's eyes opened wide, and he stumbled with his back hitting the wall. Kingston had no penis. Thick, stiff white hairs had grown from what appeared to be an open wound that looked like a mouth. Kingston kicked off the shorts and grinned widely at Ryu. "You may begin your examination," he said coldly, advancing on the doctor. By the time Ryu found breath to scream, Kingston had clamped his hand over the doctor's mouth. Russ swam alone in the grotto. He loved the feel of the water rushing against his changing skin. Jolts of electric pleasure radiated through his body with each swim stroke, his body soaking up nutrients from the ocean. The parasite had refashioned his internal organs, profaning them into something new and different. He no longer needed contacts. His back pain had disappeared, and he felt healthier and never more alive. The only thing missing from this perfect swim was Ellen. Her. He wanted to be close to her, but he had to hide now. She had told him so. The grotto provided shadow and cover, and an easy escape into the deeper ocean if he needed it. It seemed like the perfect place to remain in secret. He'd already considered sabotaging the flickering electric tiki torches, but decided against it. Ellen might need them. He stopped swimming and allowed his feet to touch the bottom. His head poked above the surface as he stared out at the ocean from the shadows. The water, so blue and clear, looked like a promised land. Would he end up there ultimately? Just another large fish in the ocean? He didn't think so. When he'd first lowered himself into the water, a small school of fish had fled at high speed. Hermit crabs crawled into their shells, stingrays dug themselves deep, and all the fish in his vicinity wanted to hide. How would he catch them? Crustaceans. Hermit crabs. He wiped away a thin line of drool from the corner of his mouth as his stomach rumbled again. Could he eat one raw? He might find out soon. The breeze shifted, and his nostrils flared at a familiar scent. His maniacal grin faded into one of relief. She was here. He heard a splash outside the grotto entrance. He swam in that direction, his feet no longer touching the bottom. At the edge of the shadows, he stopped and treaded water. He didn't have long to wait. Ellen swam languidly into the grotto and stopped before him. The surge of relief he felt collapsed into one of want and anxiety. He feared for her. He wanted to protect her. He would protect her. "How are you feeling?" she asked him. "Better now." He meant it, too. The pain in his stomach had receded, and he suddenly felt whole again. "Good," she said, and touched his shoulder. Electric tingles coursed across his skin, and he moaned. "It's nearly time. When it gets dark, get to your bungalow and wait for me." He didn't feel he had the right to ask, but he did anyway. "What will I wait for?" Ellen's soft smile turned into a malevolent grin. "Someone to help infect." Autumn wasn't happy. Although she'd infected both Nicholas and Janet, the immediate trip to the doctor had left her unsettled. Neither Janet nor Nicholas had told her what the doctor had said, but they both left with a vial of pills. Antibiotics, no doubt. Like Ellen, she wasn't sure what the drugs would do to her parasitic offspring. Might it kill them, or delay the transformation? Neither possibility was good. They needed to finish infecting everyone tonight. Bill seemed surprised she didn't want to see the doctor. She'd quickly claimed that she hadn't been bitten. He didn't seem to buy the explanation, but let it go. That worried her, too. He suspected something. She didn't know how close he was to figuring it all out, but Ellen had been adamant that Autumn infect Bill tonight. For whatever reason, her mistress didn't want to do the deed herself, although her own ongoing transformation might be the reason. Autumn's egg sacs had grown larger, and the sundress did little to hide them anymore, but she could still pass for normal in the shadows. Ellen wouldn't be able to do that much longer. By tonight, neither one of them might be able to hide their transformation. So Bill had to be tonight, then the rest of the staff. By tomorrow morning, they'd all be infected, and each female would have a male to fertilize and protect them. And once they were all infected, she'd stop smelling them. The uninfected were unclean and smelled like something from the bottom of a garbage pile. That was the only reason she wasn't looking forward to infecting Bill. She'd have to get him naked and smell that terrible scent of offal. "I'll get him in the tub," she said to herself. Yes, that would be easiest, although the shower would do as well. Maybe. She sat on the edge of her bed, her sundress drying out on the rack. Naked, her egg sacs rested against the cool sheets. If she so much as twitched, the electric promise of orgasm crept through her body. She couldn't wait to infect again. Ellen had told her to wait in the bungalow until Russ returned. After that, Autumn had a mission to complete. Russ would more than likely have to help her, since she doubted her quarry would be cooperative once they entered the bungalow. No problem. Ellen had said Russ would be able to do it, and Autumn had no reason not to believe her. Hell, by the end of the night, Nicholas and Angelo would both be well within the grips of the transformation. Providing the antibiotics did nothing to the parasites, that was. That was still the problem. They might have to find a way to steal the drugs from Bill, Janet, and Angelo. Unless Ellen already had a plan for that. The dinner hour approached, but she wasn't hungry. She doubted Janet would miss dinner, though. She'd probably be quite famished. God knew she had been the first night. So would Ellen and Russ. But tonight, Philip, Janet, and Bill would be the only likely attendees. Her presence might be missed, along with Ellen and Russ, but quite soon it would no longer matter. Once all three valets transformed, it would only be a matter of time before the rest of the island was too. The antibiotics wouldn't be effective after only a day or two, and only Bill had had a full course. Autumn shifted her legs and a moan of pleasure escaped her lips. Soon it would be dark. Then she would set up for Bill. It wouldn't take long, but she meant to enjoy every second of it. The eggs twitched in their sacs. Bill sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. He'd hoped that Ellen would make an appearance, but she hadn't, and it was nearly dinner time. She's not going to show, he thought, but doesn't she have to eat? All living things need to eat to sustain their mass and grow. The infected hadn't been to a meal in over a day, so what were they eating? Do I really want to know? He put his head in his hands and rubbed at his temple. A giggle forced its way out of his mouth. This is crazy. Fucking crazy, he said through a laugh. He remembered the sight of the egg sacs, and the laughter died in his throat. Crazy didn't mean it wasn't true. His stomach rumbled, but he felt nauseous instead of hungry. How many would be at dinner tonight? Just him, Philip, and Janet? He was willing to bet that was the case. He rose from the bed, changed into a fresh shirt and shorts, and put on his sandals. Nicholas should be by to pick him up soon. What if he doesn't? Bill shivered, suddenly imagining himself as the only uninfected and unaffected person on the island. Was that possible? No, Philip had never gone in the water. Unless Janet could somehow infect him, the man hadn't been exposed. Yet. If Bill wasn't completely insane and his worst fears came to pass, the others would somehow force him and Philip into the water. Would they do that? Are you sure? Autumn had all but lured Janet and him into the grotto, and the look on her face when Janet had been bitten was almost ecstasy. If they drag you into the water, he thought, you're done. He hissed a sigh and put on his sandals. Would Nicholas show? And if he did, would he be any different than he had been 2 hours ago? Time to find out, he said to the empty bungalow, and headed to the door.